Chapter 345 and 346. Hearing the words of this Kyuzugakure shinobi who just walked out of that hut, Kuroto squinted. Upon observing carefully, Kuroto noticed that there were traces of foreign chakra present in his body, and this chakra is exactly the same as one of the two chakras Kuroto is sensing coming from inside the hut. After this Kyuzugakure shinobi walked away, Kuroto quietly made his way inside the dilapidated hut. The house was extremely small with only 2 rooms, one being the sanitary section while the other room is being used for all other purposes. The first thing that greeted Kuroto's eye in the second room was a little girl probably around 6 or 7 years old with a small bowl in one of her little hands, holding a spoon in the other through which she was feeding the adult lady with pale and faded red hair. The lady wore disheveled clothes and looking at the parts that were uncovered with clothing all Kuroto saw were bite marks, large and small, of all sizes probably hundreds if not thousands of bite marks. In fact, some bite marks still had traces of blood indicating that they were not healing. Moreover, if Kuroto did not guess wrong, the age of this lady is probably in her 30s but looked much older. Her face was pale and sickly, her eyes sunken inside, large dark circles under the eyes, and even her red hair that symbolizes her Uzumaki descent were pale and faded nearly white. Her body was clearly malnourished as bones were protruding from her body. Even Kuroto, who has seen many kinds of scenes, was left shocked looking at the state of this lady. The mere fact that she is still alive after suffering such horrendous treatment is already a big surprise. Then Kuroto's eyes turned on the bowl held by the little girl with bright red hair. The bowl contained basic porridge that the poorest class eats, and the worst thing is that the porridge contained very few grains of cereals, directly showcasing the cause of malnutrition that the lady is suffering from. Looking at the girl with spectacles trembling and controlling her tears, Kuroto finally reacted and understood the entire situation. Kuroto was curious previously, why is Kyuzugakure lowering the commission fees so much, and still maintaining their completion without sustaining heavy losses in the number of their shinobi? The reason is all too clear now. This dying woman who is an Uzumaki, and also, most likely, Oka-san of Karen is giving Kyuzugakure the confidence to be able to do so. Those bite marks are a clear indication that Karen probably inherited heal bite from her Oka-san. Karen's Oka-san's ability to heal others' injuries through heal bite readily decreases the cost of medical care, as well as decreases the amount of time required by shinobi to heal, generally making it possible for Kyuzugakure to be able to maintain their task completion records even at such low commission fees. Sigh, they really are being a bit too extreme. Rather than using her, they are exploiting her down to the death. Idiots, Kyuzugakure shinobi do not even understand the value of talent. No, to be exact, they do not even regard her as a human being, but I suppose this is nothing new in this shinobi world. Using and exploiting others is a common thing, thought Kuroto. Even if Kuroto is already used to it, looking at the state of this woman, Kuroto really felt pity for her. While Kuroto stood there, the 2 Uzumaki did not even react to his arrival. They were already used to such intrusion. Such a thing was nothing new. But Kuroto could see fear in the eyes of the girl and indifference in the eyes of the lady. Kuroto sighed and walked forward. He came by the bed, stood by the side of the little girl, and while lightly patting her shoulder he whispered, "Little, let me see the condition of your Oka-san." Karen was visibly surprised and looked at Kuroto with widened eyes. She tried to speak something, but for some reason, she did not try to oppose Kuroto. Perhaps it was because she could sense a very calm and gentle chakra she has ever felt from this person. And for some reason, it soothed her. Kuroto went closer to the lady lying on the bed, and carefully checked her condition with Byakugan from up close. After a bit of observation, Kuroto finally shook his head. Karen's Oka-san's vitality has almost run out. If anything, it wouldn't even be wrong to say that she is alive only by sheer will. All her body functions are on the verge of stopping. If anything, the most she can live is probably a day, or 2 at most, and that too if she doesn't heal others through heal bite. If she heals others with heal bite, then there is no telling how early she will die. If overused, heal bite overdraws vitality from the source. If heal bite is used properly, then there is no problem considering Uzumaki descent, but otherwise, it will only lead to death. At this time, a shinobi walked inside the house. He has black hair of shoulder length that was combed backward, with gray pupilless eyes, and he wore a Kyuzugakure forehead protector along with a black kimono. He did not even bother to knock on the door, just walked inside as if he was in his own house. While walking into the room that Kuroto, Karen, and her mother were, he spoke, "Come on, Katsumi," assumed as Karen's mother's name. "It's time, we have suffered heavy losses in a war, you have tea," and he suddenly came to a stop midway as he noticed a stranger. And because the stranger was not dressed as a Kyuzugakure shinobi but as a normal civilian, Zosui, name of this Kyuzugakure shinobi, asked with a frown while he raised his guard against the other party, "Hey, who are you?" What are you doing here? Civilians are not allowed here. Kuroto, who was currently in a civilian's disguise, did not bother to answer, as he just stretched out his hand towards Zosui and muttered, Bansho Tenin. Even before Zosui could make out the situation or put up a resistance, all he saw was a stinging coldness in those eyes looking at him with indifference before his neck was crushed with so much force that his head twisted backward, hanging. He was dead. Plop. After killing him, Kuroto released him and Zosui's corpse fell on the floor. Both Karen and her mother were extremely surprised and shocked by what suddenly happened. The mother even pulled out a kunai that was hidden beneath the pillow and got up to protect her daughter from this dangerous person. Positioning the kunai over Kuroto's neck, she asked vigilantly, "What do you want to do with us?" Kuroto did not try to resist, and while raising his hands upwards in surrender, he said, "Don't be afraid, I am no one dangerous, and I am certainly not here to hurt either of you." Says the guy who is in a disguise and killed a Jonin-class shinobi in less than 2 seconds, that too without breaking any sweat. "I am the one who decides whether you are dangerous to us or not. Answer me, who are you? And what do you want from us?" questioned Katsumi. Although she was on verge of death, when it came to her daughter's safety she was nothing short of the fiercest and dangerous tigress out there. However, Kuroto did not panic. He just lifted off his disguise to show his true appearance and said, "My name is Kuroto. And I was here to save your daughter. I did not expect that I would find a mother here too. If only I had come a few days earlier, maybe." Before Kuroto could complete his sentence, Uzumaki Katsumi interrupted her midway. "Why would a Konoha shinobi, more so of the Hyuga clan, come here to save us? No, the better question is, how in the world did you even figure out about us being here in Kyusugakure?" Kuroto said, obtaining intelligence about Uzumaki being present was just a coincidence. As for the purpose of saving her, well, it has nothing to do with Konoha, for now at least. It is my selfish reason, and you should be very clear that if your daughter stays in Kyusugakure any longer, she will end up just like you. Hearing Kuroto's words, Katsumi's hand that held a kunai trembled and it started to cut through Kuroto's skin, but she regained her composure and said, "No, Karen is much more talented compared to me. The leader of Kyusugakure has promised that he would allow Karen to enter the Shinobi Academy, and she wouldn't end up like me. She will get to live better, cough cough, she will live a well enough life." Kuroto laughed hearing her, "Ha ha ha. I wonder what's more funny, whether it is the fact that you decided to believe him, or the fact that you are not trying to convince me here but yourself." Hearing Kuroto's words she was suddenly silent, and her hands started trembling more and more, so much the kunai in her hand further started to cut through Kuroto's skin and blood started to flow out, but Kuroto still did not panic. He was still standing there composed. Now Katsumi was silent. She did not know how to retort anymore. For her who is on the verge of death, securing a home for her only daughter is the reason why she is doing everything. She knows that she would die within a few days anyway. If her death could ensure her daughter's safety, then she would give up everything to ensure that her daughter lives on. This is the only thought that has been pushing her to stay alive as long as possible. Her daughter will become part of Kyusugakure in exchange for her life. It is not a bad deal, right? Kuroto sighed. From a certain perspective, Uzumaki Katsumi did achieve her goal. Uzumaki Karen did become part of Kyusugakure, but whether she was accepted within was another matter altogether. Even after Katsumi's death, Karen's status did not change. She was treated as nothing more than a tool that only existed to be used by Kyusugakure to heal their shinobi. Karen did not receive any formal kunoichi training, nothing at all, stunting her growth and thwarting her potential. The home Katsumi always wanted to give her daughter in Kyusugakure was never given to her. While Katsumi was busy thinking whatever, Kuroto looked at the little girl who looked completely helpless and asked, "So your name is Karen, right? Do you want to stay here forever or would you like to come with me? At the very least, I can guarantee that you will never be treated the way you are being treated here." Normally, these words all sound too sweet and hardly believable, but because Kuroto was speaking the truth so there were no fluctuations in his chakra, as such Karen knew that this person named Hyuga Kuroto was indeed speaking the truth. Besides, from beginning to end he did not attack either of the two, not even when the kunai her mother put over his neck had already started to cut through his neck and was reaching up to the bone, which further reassured her that he did not mean any harm to either of the two. After all, this person was able to kill a jonin with little to no effort, so Karen knew that if he wanted he could have forcefully taken her away and neither she nor her mother would have been able to put up any resistance. There was no need to ask her. But before she decides on anything, Karen asked one thing, "Will you take my Oka-san with you?" Kuroto doesn't really have any problem with it and nodded without a second thought. Of course, she can come. Hearing a positive reply, Karen immediately urged Katsumi, "Oka-san, please let's go with him. You should also be able to sense that he is not lying. Please, let's just leave from here." Katsumi looked at Karen with a tangled expression, firstly because she did not expect that her daughter hated Kyuzagukyur so much, perhaps it was not surprising considering that this village has already killed her, and the second reason was that Katsumi knows that she is going to die soon. This person may have been honest to both of them, but even Katsumi realizes that he knows that she would not live more than a few days. And if we really go, then all my life was meaningless. I did everything for, no, that's not the right way of thinking, before my death, I can still do one thing for Karen, thought Katsumi with a determined expression. Kuroto noticed that change in expression and he was really curious what the dying mother is going to do. Katsumi stared at Kuroto and asked with a serious expression, "Can you assure my daughter's safety until she is strong enough to protect herself?" Kuroto nodded, "I can assure you. I can also assure you that after following me, she will get to live as a human being, not like a tool." Hearing Kuroto's reply, Katsumi nodded as her hand loosened and the kunai in her hand dropped to the ground. Next, she turned around and slowly walked towards Karen, then kneeled down to be at the same height as her daughter. At this time, she had light tears flowing down her eyes. She held her daughter's cheek and said, "Oka-san is sorry Karen-chan, but she won't be able to stay with you any longer while alive, but you do not need to worry. Oka-san will always remain in your heart, she will always watch over, she will always protect you." Karen was confused for a while, she couldn't understand what Katsumi was speaking. After all, this person has said that they both can come with him, so why can't Oka-san stay with her? And before she knew it, Karen's eyes became wet. She did not want this, her Oka-san could finally live, but why? Why always her? Katsumi smiled gently and wiped away Karen's tears as she said, "Remember, strong kunoichi do not cry." Karen nodded as he tried her best to hold her tears from flowing out of her eyes. Katsumi nodded in approval, "That's my girl," and caressed Karen's head. Then she hugged her daughter with all her strength, burying Karen's head in her bosom while Karen did everything she could to not cry. While continuing to caress her daughter's back, Katsumi tapped on Karen's neck with her index and middle finger, immediately following which an Uzumaki clan symbol appeared at the back part of Karen's neck. Katsumi's action did not go unnoticed by Kuroto, and he was surprised to find that Katsumi's entire chakra and whatever life force she had left was flowing inside that Uzumaki clan symbol. After a full 2 minutes of transfer, the Uzumaki symbol glowed with a crimson light similar to Karen's hair, then soon vanished as if it did not exist at all. Immediately, after which, all of Katsumi's hair turned pure white, and her hollow eyes lost the color of life, indicating that she was now dead, but just before her death, Katsumi whispered to Kuroto, "Please protect my daughter." From Karen's reaction, Kuroto was sure that the little girl did not notice what her mother did. Karen may have not felt what her mother did, but she did notice the loss of life from her mother's body. And with Katsumi's death, Karen broke down, but she did not cry. She is a strong kunoichi. But even if she had long expected that this day would come soon, she never expected that it would come so soon, just as things were going to change. After quietly taking away Katsumi's dead body out of Kyuzagukyur along with Karen, the two buried Katsumi on top of a cliff in the land of fire where people seldom venture. Standing in front of the tree under which Katsumi's body was buried, Karen looked down silently. Kuroto caressed her head and lightly said, "It's okay to cry it out." While choking and resisting tears, Karen shook her head. "Oka-san said that strong kunoichi does not cry. I can't cry. I have to become strong like Oka-san." Kuroto said lightly, "It's okay to cry today. As said before, weakness is a sin in this shinobi world, but crying and mourning someone's death is not a sign of weakness." Kuroto knows exactly what Karen feels. After all, he too lost his parents at an early age and had to rely only upon himself to survive. It was Yui who taught him that crying is allowed. If we are sad, if it is hurting, then crying eases away our pain. It's never a sign of weakness. For a little girl who is only about 6 years old, it is natural to cry after losing the only person who cared and loved her to death. Kuroto said gently, "It's okay to cry today, I am giving you the permission." With Kuroto's permission, Karen could no longer resist, and tears that she has been trying to resist for so long broke out at once. And she cried hard, she vented out all her sadness and loneliness. All this while, the Uzumaki symbol behind her neck glowed and spread an unknown warmth in her heart. Karen remembers this warmth, it's what she felt with her Oka-san by her side, and this warmth reassured Karen that even if gone, her Oka-san was still with her. Kuroto curiously looked at the symbol, and he could perceive what was happening, but he did not speak anything. That Uzumaki clan symbol stores Uzumaki Katsumi's chakra as well as life force, and perhaps even a shard of her soul, which is why she can perceive Karen's emotion and act on it. After a while, when Karen had finally calmed down, she said to the stone tablet between the giant roots of the tree, I will become the strongest kunoichi in existence, and I will make you proud, Oka-san. Until next time. Leaving this sentence, she turned around and spoke to Kuroto, let's go, Kuroto-sama. Kuroto nodded while secretly glancing at the elusive image of Uzumaki Katsumi standing before the tree he was able to perceive. He did not tell Karen about this because Katsumi signaled him to keep quiet, to which he nodded. With Karen finally was ready to go, Kuroto took her to the Anchor Vantion. Karen was honestly very surprised by looking at Anchor Vantion. It was like from those fairy tales, floating castles, it just that the appearance of the castle looked quite shabby, but she did not mind. Karen repeatedly asked many questions from Kuroto. He did answer the ones that he was okay to let Karen know at this point, and did not answer the ones that he was not okay with. The arrival of Karen surprised Gaara, and he was quite nervous now. In Suna, Gaara's situation is similar to Naruto's. Gaara does not have any friends. He has always desired for others to acknowledge his existence and befriend him but unfortunately never have been. So when Karen arrived at Anchor Vantion, Gaara was nervous about whether she will treat him the same way he was treated at Suna. Karen obviously did not have any prejudices against Gaara. Besides, she was able to feel that Gaara's chakra gave her a protective feeling. And since Shikaku's chakra was completely sealed and since Karen is not yet proficient enough to sense such hidden chakra, so she was unable to sense the evil chakra of Ichibi. As such, she stared at Gaara curiously, but if you ask her, she was more curious about the kanji character on Gaara's forehead than Gaara himself. Kuroto said looking at the two children, all right, both of you introduce yourselves. Karen was the first one to speak, I am Uzumaki Karen, I want to become the strongest kunoichi, nice to meet you. Karen's cheerful attitude towards him surprised Gaara, and after a bit of hesitation he finally bowed and introduced himself, I am Gaara, Jinchuriki of Ichibi, Shikaku, my dream is to become a strong shinobi worthy of Kuroto-sama's recognition. Karen nodded, then asked curiously while tilting her head, what's a Jinchuriki? And what's Ichibi? Gaara suddenly came to halt. He was not sure whether he should inform her of Shikaku. For that reason, he looked at Kuroto who has already started to walk somewhere. Perhaps it was because Kuroto felt Gaara's gaze, he suddenly came to a halt and said, it's up to you Gaara-kun, if you feel like it, then you can, otherwise you don't have to. Gaara was silent. Meanwhile, Karen turned towards the fourth person standing in the room and asked him, what is your name, Aji-san? Asked by Karen, the fourth person who has been silent until now, tilted his head in confusion and said lightly, I do not have a name. Karen was confused, why not? Gaara was also confused, he has yet to recognize who this person is even though he feels that this person is familiar. Kazekage Puppet was confused and after a while of silence, he said, I was never given a name. Why not? Karen asked again. Kazekage Puppet said, I do not know, perhaps Kuroto-sama may know. Why would he know? Don't parents give names to their children? He is certainly not your parent, so how can he know? Karen was getting more and more confused as she talked with this Aji-san. Now even Gaara was looking at the conversation of the two, he was also very curious. While Kazekage Puppet looked at Kuroto for answers and explanations, he was too late as Kuroto had already left the room and gone somewhere else. On Kuroto's side. After having left the room to give some time to the two kids to befriend each, Kuroto was now thinking of the training plan for the two. Because of the early awakening of sand release within him, Gaara's starting point can be said to be second only to Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Shursui of the same generation. Even if Kuroto does not interfere, it wouldn't be wrong to say that Gaara can naturally grow into a very top-tier Kage-class shinobi on his own. But since Kuroto has taken Gaara under his wing, so obviously Kuroto is unsatisfied with anything below top-tier Super Kage class. After all, anything below the level of Super Kage is pretty much useless during the Fourth Great Shinobi War. And Kuroto obviously needs Gaara to at least be on the level of Senjutsu Enhanced Karama Mode Uzumaki Naruto, below that is pointless. With that intent in mind, and taking Gaara's fighting style in mind, Kuroto has to formulate a training plan. After thinking a little, Kuroto decided not to go with any fancy training plans but instead started with training Gaara's basic taijutsu skills with minimum reliance over sand armor. Regardless of the natural abilities brought by Kekkai Genkai, two factors are what actually determine the strength of a shinobi. One is fighting wisdom, the ability to fully display their own strength. Many people have the first ability, and yet not everyone has the ability to fully display their strength in a battle. Take Hirako as an example. Even with 5 Kekkai Genkai, he lost and had to sacrifice his legs and hands. Meanwhile, Yondim-sama single-handedly with his Hirashin no Jutsu and Rasengan became the most feared shinobi of the Third Great Shinobi War. So just having strength is not enough, training fighting wisdom is much more important. The second factor is none other than chakra control. Chakra is the root of all jutsu, so the better and finer chakra control, the better a shinobi will be at all forms of combats. And since Gaara has always been strong since early childhood, therefore, he does not have appropriate fighting wisdom. Gaara sure can overwhelm others with his superior strength, but when to put against someone of the same age and similar strength, there are very high chances that he will be the one to lose. This is clearly displayed from his panic and shock when fighting Rock Lee and Uchiha Sasuke. Although Gaara did not lose, when he was on the verge of losing as he was seriously overwhelmed. Especially against Uchiha Sasuke, when Gaara was on the verge of losing control in the canon. As such, Kuroto planned a physique training plan for Gaara. Besides, taijutsu combat is the best method to beat in fighting wisdom within someone. In a fast-paced taijutsu fight, one must learn to predict the opponent's next move, learn to use fakes, mislead others, look for gaps and opportunities, and also learn to figure out traps and all, so combat experience increases readily. As such, taijutsu is the best. After Gaara's training plan was decided, the next up is Karen. And Kuroto plans to not train Karen for the time being. This is not because Kuroto couldn't think up a training plan for Karen, but it is because while Karen lived in Kyusugakure, she did not receive appropriate nutrition. As such, even though she is an Uzumaki, her physique is still quite weak. Before starting to train, Karen needs to recover and come to a normal point, otherwise there will be a negative sequela. Of course, Kuroto isn't going to keep her free while she recovers. With Karen's talent and her Uzumaki descent, Kuroto is of course unsatisfied if she ends up being just part of the support and logistics department. She has to be someone of the same level as Gaara. Someone who can fight alongside Gaara at the same level while also restrains him should Shikaku get out of control. For this purpose, Kuroto is going to start her teachings in calligraphy and train her calculation abilities, which are extremely essential for Fuinjutsu. Karen is an Uzumaki, so teaching her Uzumaki Fuinjutsu is obvious. But Fuinjutsu of course requires many things, which have to be taught to her. Training her calculation abilities will not only be helpful in Fuinjutsu but also make a base for her when she starts learning biotechnology, as she will be Kuroto's assistant, so that is a necessity. With everything decided, Kuroto summoned the Kazekage puppet and instructed him on everything, who nodded ever so respectfully. And with everything is taken care of, Kuroto was about to leave, just then Kazekage puppet suddenly spoke, "Kuroto-sama, why do I have no name?" Kuroto was surprised by the sudden question, and asked curiously, why the sudden interest in a name? Kazekage puppet narrated Karen's and Gaara's questions a while ago and then spoke after thinking a little, "Everyone has a name, Gaara-sama, Karen-sama, Itachi-sama, Shisui-sama, Pakura-sama, Shinichi-sama, only I don't, why is that?" Kuroto was surprised, suddenly asking for a name, huh? I wonder what will be the next change. Kuroto honestly never expected that the Kazekage puppet would suddenly ask for a name, it almost seems that he is turning into a living form. After thinking a little, Kuroto said, "Now that you mention it, you do need a name. Let's do it this way, since the two of them asked you, how about I entrust them with this, let the two of them work on a name for you, this will be their first challenge in their shinobi path." Kazekage puppet nodded and then left to tell Gaara and Karen their first challenge. With that out of the way, Kuroto smiled and started walking towards the exit of Anchor Vantion. This time for the plan of bringing subordinates, Kuroto went on with his sensei's approach. Intervening and helping the children when their hearts were most vulnerable and they were in the most critical situations of their lives. Kuroto being their savior naturally earned him all of their trust, so Kuroto believes that as long as both of them are properly brainwashed and treated with care, either of the two will not hesitate to give up their lives if Kuroto asks. Which is the kind of undying and unquestionable loyalty Kuroto wants. Satisfied, Kuroto flew out of Anchor Vantion, and went to the meeting place agreed on with Shisui. In the past few days, everywhere Kuroto went, he used the Tenseigan chakra mode, so not many days have passed. As such, Shisui, who was coming normally from the land of wind, obviously did not reach Konohagakure yet. After meeting with Shisui, both of them went to Konoha. A few days later. Konohagakure, Hokage office. When Kuroto and Shisui returned and passed on Kazekage Dano's scroll to Hokage-sama, they also learned about the mission of Kakashi and Guy. Both of them had already returned 2 days ago with the agreement from Reikage. And Reikage had obviously agreed to join the raid. While Sandame read the report, he was surprised by the act of Hyuga Kuroto and Uchiha Shisui of saving Sunagakure from Ichibi's rampage, as well as the execution of Ichibi Jinchuriki. While Sandame chose to not pay much attention to the execution of Suna's Jinchuriki, Sandame especially commended Shisui and Kuroto for their decision to interfere to stop Ichibi's rampage. This will improve relations between Konoha and Suna to some extent, which is exactly what is needed at this point in time. Next, Sandame concluded the mission. With that out of the way, put away both the scroll and then ordered the 4 shinobi of the Umbu Team 11, in the upcoming secret meeting, Team 11 will accompany me as my guards, is that clear? Sandame has already attached great importance to eliminating Akatsuki, and because of the unclear identity of the spy, he has made sure to keep this raid a secret even from the other 3 elder advisors. After all, Akatsuki has too many roguemen of Konoha, there is no guarantee who is a spy, it is better to only keep the people with the least number involved in the entire raid. Sandame cannot ignore the likes of Uchiha Shinichi, Hirako, and Orochimaru to be part of Akatsuki. In regards to Sandame's order, neither of the 4 of Team 11 had any objections and they nodded at the same time, yes Hokage-sama.